Just a heads up on today's topic, because we're going to be talking about sexuality as it pertains to ancient Egypt. And so you might want to put your headphones on or take this one and wait to watch it someplace secluded in case, you get walked in on. Don't want to cause anybody any embarrassment. And if you happen to be under 13 and you watch the Kemetic how-to guide, for this episode you might want to get an adult that you're comfortable with to sit and watch it with you so that if you have some questions, you have someone trustworthy you can ask. With that said, on to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Kemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian Pagan and Kemetic practitioners. I'm your host, Sharon. Several viewers have asked about Egyptian religion and Egyptian society and homosexuality. And this is a very complex topic, but it's definitely one that's worth exploring. So let me give you a little bit of historical background and we can kind of work from there. A great reference on this topic is the book Private Life in New Kingdom Egypt by Lynn Maskell. This book, my one criticism is she's real heavy on the feminist bent, and it comes to the fore in her writing in several places. I kind of disagree with some of her ways of looking at that, but she directly addresses homosexuality and has some very, very interesting things to say about it in here. She makes some very good points, such as, number one, our idea of gay as an identity, as a lifestyle, is only about 100 to maybe 150 years old. Gay as we know it didn't exist in the ancient world because they did not see having same-sex desires or same-sex acts as making you a different kind of person. You could be just a dude, just a gal, but if you happen to have relations with a member of the same sex, that didn't make you a different sort of person. And I'm going to add this observation. A lot of the social cues that we have that we think, oh, this means that someone is gay, didn't mean the same thing back then. For example, whether it's actually true or not, we tend to perceive men who are very concerned about their physical appearance as being gay, and lesbian women like masculine things. But in ancient Egypt, both sexes wore jewelry, both sexes wore makeup. In fact, guys, may have even been a little more prissy about their appearance than the women. And you had goddesses like Neet and Sekhmet, who were described in hymns as a woman who acts as a man, but there were also mother goddesses. So these social aspects that we consider to be markers of gay or not gay, those didn't mean the same thing back then. Now, did the ancient Egyptians count a third gender? You know what? Maybe. There is a particular word, and we find it in the execration texts. Those were texts from the Old and Middle Kingdom that were used to cast out, enemies. And the word that's used is Sekheti. And it's been translated differently by different scholars. The passage, you can read it in various books. It'll say all men, all women, and then all. Depending on who the scholar is, you might see all eunuchs, all intersexed, all, effeminate men. It really depends on who's trying to translate the word, because we don't have it in enough context to really understand it. What we really need is to find more texts that use that word maybe in a different context so we can understand it better. So the jury's still out on whether or not there's a third gender. There might have been a transgender in ancient Egypt. What I think is interesting to note is that creator deities often are very androgynous, and Akhenaten in particular kind of explored that in some of the art that he had commissioned. So, there's nothing to say that there was not a third gender in ancient Egypt. As for the deed itself, the actual act, the Egyptians had a word, nik. And it was written with a determinative that you'd get in trouble if you drew it in school. But it meant penetration. And there was no negative connotation to that word, it was just there. But niku was a derogatory word for doing that to somebody. And a nekek was a man who had that done to him. and that was kind of, you didn't want to be someone's nekek. And evidently the Egyptians, in that regard, felt that it was better to give than to receive. But did the ancient Egyptians have same-sex relations? Well, of course they did. You know, they were human. And in fact, there is a Middle Kingdom story describing none other than King Neferka-Ra going to the house of his unmarried general Sassanet. And the story says, after His Majesty did what he desired with him, he returned to his place. Now, what do you think they were doing late at night? And of course, let's not forget the contendings of Horus and Set, where Set tries to make Horus, his poor nephew, his nekek. Horus didn't enjoy it, but in one version of the story it said that Set found it sweet to his heart. So obviously he, enjoyed doing that sort of thing. So, with those kinds of examples, and also references from the wisdom texts, how did the ancient Egyptians think about same-sex relations? They seem kind of ambivalent. Because in the instructions of Ptahhotep, he advises against, and the book talks about this, he advises against having intercourse with, the word used, the way it's translated is a man-boy or a woman-boy. The wording, there's probably some meaning there that we're not entirely sure of, but he advised against doing it, and it seems to me, at least, comparing that, don't have sex with an effeminate boy, and also one of the negative confessions in certain versions is, I have not had sex with a boy. My question is the objection because it's someone of the same sex, or because it's a child? It sounds to me that to them it was more concerned about doing it with a young man who might have been under the age. They didn't have an age of consent, but maybe an age where he could think for himself. I don't know, but they did not have the kind of vehement religious objection to homosexuality that we have today, and part of that's because they didn't see a person who did that as they're gay, they're not straight. In ancient Egypt, people didn't worry about, in the words of comedian Ralphie May, getting the gay, which people are afraid of doing now. They didn't have that kind of hang-up, and it may not have been considered the most upstanding sort of behavior in social circles. It was more desirable to have a wife and to have children because they were meant to carry on your legacy and to give offerings to you after you were gone. But I don't think they had any serious misgivings about it on the level that a lot of people here do. And another thing to consider with in Egyptian families, you had a lot of different people in one household, and a lot of women. It's entirely possible, if you ask me, that you could have had women who had lesbian relationships, but they were living in the same house, and we wouldn't know about it because it wasn't like you have now where two women go off and they get an apartment. Oh my God, they're living in sin. How would you know? They're in the same house together with, half a dozen other people. Privacy might have been another issue. Egyptian houses didn't have as many rooms as ours do, so how would you, get time? They probably went off, under the date palms or the, someplace secluded in order to, have relations with another person. Hopefully this has given you some interesting information, some insight into how a very controversial topic might have been viewed in another culture. I think it's always interesting to learn about this because it gives us a little perspective on our own, and what kinds of things do we have hang-ups about today that maybe weren't such a big deal in another point in time. So, for the Kemetic How-To Guide, this is Sharon, wishing you Senepti.